Hello, fellow Megatenists, and welcome to the History of Persona panel. I'm Larrue, and with me is Simply Dad,
What's up, man?
Nyarly,
What's up?
and Nyarly's dog. So we're gonna go over
Yeah.
the whole purpose of this is to just cover, I think, mostly what makes Persona Persona, as well as giving you guys some time to ask questions at the end. So just if you have any questions, just hold them to the end, and we'll read them and answer them via the chat. All right. So let's get started. I put this quote out here. This is a quote from Kazuma Kaneko in an interview with Araki, the creator of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and it's basically describing the creation of Persona and what the basis of it is. And I just put it there so you guys know that JoJo's and Persona aren't, they're not related. All right.
All right, so the first game in the SMT, what is this called? The first game in the Persona franchise is actually Shin Megami Tensei If, released on October 28th, 1994. Something cool about the game is that people like to call it Persona Zero, but it actually kind of is. Shin Megami Tensei If was made within 6 months after the release of SMT2. It's a spin-off of the original Shin Megami Tensei from 1992, but in this game, the nuclear apocalypse from the game never happened. It's more like a what-if side story kind of game. And the plot revolves around a student at Karokozaka High School who basically just goes on this mad-ass incel rage and just throws the school into Makai, which is just known as the Demon World. The player can choose between 3 classmates that go through slightly different scenarios that lead to different endings, which is a concept that bleeds itself into Persona. The game takes on the gameplay from SMT 1 and 2 of first-person dungeon crawling with a team of 2 humans and 4 demons. And this game introduces gameplay changes like a front and back row system, which is reused in Persona 1, where the first 3 party members do more damage in the front, and the last 3 take less damage but also can't connect with short-range attacks, relying more on guns and magic and all that. But it also introduces this stupid-ass ammo mechanic where you have to actively purchase individual bullets for your gun, load your gun, and then reload it when it's out of ammo, and each shot fired is a bullet expended from the gun, which is realistic, I guess, but it's like the dumbest thing to ever actually add into a video game. It don't make no sense. And it also shows up again in Soul Hackers, which is no bueno. But the most significant addition to SMT If is what was I gonna say? The Guardian system, which inspired the Personas in the later game. The concept for the Guardians were actually created by Katsura Hoshino, who's later to become the director of the Persona series 3, 4, and 5. The way the system works is that every human character is assigned a single Guardian, which gives you stat bonuses on top of your assigned stats. And even though Guardians come with their own set of skills that include, physical attacks and magical skills, status buffs and debuffs, ailments and all that, even though it's all that, and even though you can level up your partner's intelligence stats and your own intelligence stats, only your partner has access to all the skills, and your protagonist can't use no skills at all. Like, they can't use no magic, they can't use no buffs, not even physical skills, which cost HP and no MP at all. It's like, whatever, the game's not... It's not really the best to begin with, so... when you get into battles, on top of gaining experience and money, you now get Guardian points, and because of that, the game removes game overs entirely. Instead, when you die, you get booted back to the start of the dungeon, and depending on how many Guardian points you've obtained, your Guardian either upgrades or downgrades. I think it's pretty dumb that dying is an expectation in the game, since it's required to unlock newer and potentially better Guardians, and it also punishes you for getting wiped randomly. But from what I've been told, it works out since it's basically like a fast travel, and a lot of the dungeons in the game are incredibly huge. But something that the game does different from the original Shin Megami Tensei games is that the plot revolves less around the world that you're set in. SMT 1 and 2 were more about, the changes that happen to the world because of your actions. It chooses to narrow down the scope of everything, setting its focus more on the characters in a more introspective way, which is something that Persona expands upon to like a 1,000th degree. Unlike SMT1, which takes place in a post-apocalyptic Tokyo, or SMT2, which takes you into the gritty cyberpunk future of that world, SMT-IF takes place in a high school setting, which is pretty new for its time. It was probably one of the most well-received aspects of the game, since, the rest of the game's kind of not good. It's also the first game in the series to introduce the option to choose between a male and female protagonist, which isn't revisited until SMT9 on the Xbox in 2002. Tamaki, the female protagonist, is a character that reappears later in Persona 1, actually, as a student at St. Herlemine, which is the school that you go to. And in Persona 2, she's an adult working at the Kuzunoa Detective Agency. And just a fun fact that her fit in the game is actually the same outfit worn by Rei Reiho in the original Devil Summoner game on Sega Saturn, which is where the Kuzunoa come from. But some cool-ass trivia about the game is that Nobu, the male protagonist in SMT-IF, actually has his own continuity in the manga adaptation of SMT-IF, as well as the sequel manga, SMT-Con. Yeah, that manga follows the Yumi route, which is probably the worst one you could go for since it's the most boring. You kind of just ditch literally everybody else in the school to find your own way out. Except in the manga, the school isn't saved at all like it is in the game. Like, hundreds of students and faculty members all disappear and never come back, and they're probably dead. The manga continues the what-if concept, showing Nobu and Yumi taking part in an altered version of the SMT1 plot. I never read it before, but from what Larrue told me, it's pretty badass. So if you're at all interested in SMT-IF, or if you played the game and enjoyed it somehow, I think it's worth checking out, just from what I've heard. But this is also the first game to feature special Jack Frost, little Hiho-kun down there. He's just a little baby that loved school life so much, he said fuck it and decided to become a student as well, dressing up in his own little uniform, which ain't even the school uniform from the game, but it's alright, because, he's trying his best, and that's all I can really ask of him. Characters like the SMT 1 and 2 protagonists, the Law and Chaos heroes, Steven and Pascal appear in the game as secret fiend race bosses that you find just walking around, and there's a random chance that you'll run into them as spirits. And when you beat the game, you get an option of a New Game Plus feature with an exclusive fourth route with another classmate, Akira, where you go through an Akira exclusive dungeon. Dude eventually fuses with the demon Amon, who previously partnered with the villain in the prequel mobile game Hazama Chapter. And this whole route is a massive reference to the manga series Devilman, which has been noted by Cosmic Conoco as a huge inspiration to the franchise. So I think it's a pretty good, it's probably the best thing in the game. But all that kind of leads itself into the original Persona, which released on September 28th, 1996.
So, Persona follows the Jungian concepts pretty closely. So it's really kind of important. The name Persona actually refers to the Roman masks that actors would wear. They were just called persona, as well as meaning personality in Latin. And yeah, it's a kind of mask designed on one hand to make a definitive impression on someone and to conceal your true nature. So the idea is that everyone has a true self they keep hidden. So the self is our feelings of wholeness, unity, and identity. The anima these aren't all the Jungian concepts, by the way. These are the ones that I think are most prevalent in Persona. So the anima is the female side of men, that's seen in Persona 4. The animus is the masculine side of women, also seen in Persona 4. The shadow is the cruel side of us that contains all the more animalistic aspects of living, as well as our feelings of inferiority or lacking.
And a big theme of the Persona game is the Fool's Journey. Basically, it's a metaphor for every single aspect of our journey through life. Each of the major arcana in the 22, I think it's the major 22, stands for a stage on that journey, an experience that a person must incorporate to realize they're, full person as they grow into adults. It's not really something that's shown in Persona 1 and 2. It only becomes more prevalent as the Fool Arcana becomes a major player in games like Persona 3, 4, and 5, where they represent the main character who's a blank slate that through his social links and things like that expand and grow more as a person. But a lot of the new things introduced in Persona 1, I think something that's important to mention, that Persona 1 is the first game written by Tadashi Satomi, and it's also the last Atlas game to be composed by Hirohito Aoki before his passing in 2002. And to go off on a little tangent, I think the Persona franchise wouldn't be nearly the same without his contributions to the game. It set the standards for the quality of music that the series is known for, and I can guarantee anybody here that everyone that worked under him and after him sees him as an inspiration. Like, Persona 1 by far has the best soundtrack in my opinion. So, like, even if you're not interested in playing the game, I think it's absolutely worth your time, and you owe it to yourself to listen to the soundtrack on your own time, because god damn, it's just the greatest thing I ever heard in my entire life. I think definitely up there, like, top 3 Megaton soundtracks. That guy's just amazing. Like, rest in peace, all respect to that guy, he did amazing. But the themes of the original Persona revolve around trying to separate the ideal from the real, the kind of way we perceive ourselves in the face of others, and how that perspective affects how we see the world around us. Going any further is kind of spoiler shit, so I'm gonna pause there, but, like, this game is the first one to introduce the character Philemon and the concept of the collective unconsciousness of man, the unspoken collection of thought and ideals that every human has inside them. He grants the protagonist and his friends personas at the start of the game, which are the replacement for guardians. And everybody in the game has the ability to wield multiple personas, since the idea of the wild card didn't exist back then. And something interesting is that they dropped the idea of the Cathedral of Shadows, which is used in SMT games to fuse demons, for the Velvet Room. And something cool about the Velvet Room to mention is that it's actually inspired by the Red Room from Twin Peaks, and Twin Peaks is like this show from the 90s that I don't know nothing about. And the name and the color is inspired by Blue Velvet, and maybe a lot of the inhabitants from the Velvet Room are named after characters from Frankenstein for whatever reason. I don't even know if that's explained or not, like Igor, Elizabeth, Margaret, Theodore, all of them. And the Demon Painter in Persona 2 is actually based off of Kazuma Kaneko, the artist of the SMT and Persona games, which makes sense because that used to be his name when he was working on, it was either SMT 1 or a game before that. He was just known as the Demon Artist. The way you used to fuse personas in that game is, just a little side mention, is the way you fuse personas in that game is that, Persona 1 specifically, is that you just walk up to Igor, he's like, hey, I want to fuse this demon with this demon, make a persona. He's like, okay. So he gets this weird looking phone that's made out of, like, bones, and he goes like, beep, 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 ring, ring. Hey, what's going on, man? You want to come on down? And then they fuse into a persona. And we also learn in that game, a very, very unique piece of trivia, that Igor has legs, because he actually stands up, and he's actually tall as hell. It's kind of crazy. Really important lore thing to mention. But a couple months after the original Persona release, it came out as Revelations Persona in the West, and a lot of things were changed, like a lot of things that kind of makes it almost an entirely different game if you think about it, and ignore the fact that it has the same exact gameplay. Characters' names and appearances were changed to sound more American. You know, Masao Inaba is now Mark, Brown is Brad, Reiji is Chris, Yukino is Yuki, Eriko is Ellie. The town in Mikagecho was renamed to Lunarvale. I don't understand the significance of that. And some Persona names were changed entirely or just mistranslated. I actually don't know which ones are which. But the whole side story, the Snow Queen quest, which is like an alternate route that you can take at the very, very start of the game, which gives you an entirely different story, which is like another 20-30 hours on top of, you know, the main Sebek route. It's just removed entirely. The box that starts the entire quest is just gone, and even if you do access it through hacking, all the text is dummied out, so it's not even translated properly, and virtually every single reference to Japan is removed to make it seem like it was released or it takes place in America. But a lot of the cool things that Persona 1 established that are used in other games to come is that it starts the underlying theme of rumors, which is in every single Persona game, whether it's like very subtle or not that much used. Like in the original Persona game, the rumor that sets off the whole plot is the rumor of the Persona game, where if you walk to like each corner of a room and say some bullshit, then you're supposed to see like ghosts or whatever, and that starts the whole plot of the game. A lot of the characters, every single main party member is assigned an arcanum for the major 22, like the Emperor, Empress, Hierophant, Temperance, and things like that. It also introduces the composer Shoji Meguro. This is the first game he ever worked on for the company, And his first task was creating something. I think it was supposed to be a credits theme, which eventually became the Velvet Room theme, which is obviously a mainstay of the franchise. And in 1995, I believe, Atlas hires Shigenori Soejima and Megumi Shirashi to work under Kazuma Kaneko to help him with his digital artwork. And I think it's important to mention because Soejima later becomes the main artist for the Persona games, starting with 3, I believe. And some cool trivia about Persona 1, just to wrap it all up, is that the Revelations tag was only used for 2 games made by Atlas. It was supposed to be the branding for Shin Megami Tensei in the West, but they kind of dropped that real damn fast, especially since I think the name Revelations and the fact that the game features demons as enemies was really big, especially since like the whole like religious boom and everyone saying that video games are demonic. It was a spill, but the other game that had the Revelations title in it was Revelations the Demon Slayer, which I think was the Western port of Last Bible 1, which is a Game Boy game. The game is also known as Persona Be Your True Mind in Japan, and that's actually the title for the soundtrack. If you purchase that at any time soon, just look up Persona Be Your True Mind, and I think it'll show up. Nanjo's little muffler, or Nate, if you've played Revelations, and the muffler is kind of like his little itty-bitty scarf, big-ass scarf thing, has a number 1 on it, and according to Kazuma Kaneko, this was because otherwise he'd just be known as the muffler guy, and nobody wants to be known by that, even people who wear mufflers. Something that I thought was really cool that Larrue told me is that all the demons in the game were voiced by Atlas JP staff members, which I think is really funny when you think about it, because they're probably just in the booth having a fantastic time just making random-ass noises. But Persona 1 received a PC port. The first edition featured an Igor promo card for the digital Devil Story trading card game, which is apparently popular again since someone's translating it. The script took about a year to write, with the staff going through 20 drafts. The first draft involved the students going on a field trip and being caught in a series of mysterious events. And this is one of the more fondly remembered versions out of, all of them. And Mark's birthday is actually today, June 11th. It's not June. Fuck. July 11th. Alright. Happy birthday, Mark. I'm done.
Thank you. Alright, so now on to Persona 2, a personal favorite of mine. So, as some of you may know, Persona 2 is made up of 2 games. Those games are Innocent Sin and Eternal Punishment. And oddly enough, in the West, we actually got Eternal Punishment on the PS1, but we didn't get Innocent Sin on the PS1. It wasn't until 2011 when we officially got Innocent Sin, which was on the PSP. Now, the Persona 2 duology was very similar to Persona 1 in many ways, but it was also different in many ways. Like, for one thing, the game is now played entirely from an overhead view, including the combat and the dungeon crawling. The combat is largely similar, though there are some changes, like there are now fusion spells, characters can now only hold 1 weapon because they removed guns, and there's no more grid-based targeting system. Now, when it comes to symbolism, Persona 2 is one of the games that's the heaviest in it. Philemon and Nyarlathotep, who were only minor characters in the first game, are now the driving force behind the main plot, and it also introduced the concept of shadows, which would be one of the main themes of Persona 4, and it delves into the whole idea of the collective unconscious and our beliefs and things like growing up and other stuff. I don't want to go into too much detail because I want you all to experience it for yourselves, but if you're the kind of person that really cares about story and themes in video games, you're really going to love Persona 2. So, some fun facts about Persona 2. A lot of the NPCs are named and designed after Atlas staff, and the same is also true with some pop culture figures in Japan, like Lisa's dad is literally Steve Seagal, which I think is pretty funny. Another cool thing is that there are some optional side stories in the PSP versions, like in Innocent Sin, you have this one that goes to you revisit the school from Shin Megami Tensei If, and you fight a demon summoner, which I think is some of the coolest fan service in the series. But, as was mentioned before, the Velvet Rouge's demon painter is based on Kazuma Kaneko, and his backstory is that he painted a blue door, went through it, and then never came out, and that's how he wound up in the Velvet Room. And also there are a lot of like renditions of classical music compositions, which I think is pretty cool. Alright, so now on to another personal favorite of mine, and my first ever Megaton game. That game is Persona 3, which is the game that would kind of lay out or define what modern Persona would be today. It's about a group of high school students that use their personas to investigate the Dark Hour and a mysterious tower called Tartarus, and the story takes influence from Roman, Greek, and Christian mythology. Now, going back to what I was saying about this game innovating on Persona, it was the first game to introduce the social sim elements. In the overworld, you have to manage your time where you develop relationships, study for exams, manage your stats, and you can also upgrade your persona stats. I mean, there is a lot to do in the overworld, and it all affects how you perform in the dungeon crawling and the combat. It also introduced the one more turn system, where landing a critical hit or hitting the enemy's weakness will give you an extra turn and allow you to go again. And doing this also knocks the enemies down, and when all the enemies are knocked down, you can do an all-out attack, which deals a whole lot of damage to every enemy. And it's going to be the way you're going to be dealing with most random encounters. It also had English rapping from Lotus Juice and some other vocals by Yumi Kawamura for the soundtrack, and even though this game did do a lot of things different, the development was headed by a lot of the staff from Persona 1 and 2, and basically the developer's vision when making this game was to make a Persona game that was familiar yet fresh, and that's just what this game is. It's also the first game to be directed by Katsura Hoshino, who would go on to be the director of Persona 4, Persona 5, and Catherine. Now, I also briefly want to talk about the American localization, because this is when Atlus started putting the Shin Megami Tensei moniker on every game, including Persona, which was done by Atlus USA to sort of unify the Mega 10 games in the West, to let everyone know they were part of the same franchise, because, you know, let's be honest, Atlus Japan isn't the best when it comes to naming their games. I mean, they got all kinds of different, like, titles and, you know, there's just a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense with their naming in Japan. I mean, I did an entire video about that, if you want to watch it. But, and lastly, I want to talk about the re-releases. In 2007, Atlus released an updated version of Persona 3 titled FES, which added a few new things, added some new personas, some new costumes, but it also added a new epilogue where you play as Aegis. And then in 2009, they released Persona 3 Portable for the PSP, which it toned down the graphics a little bit to make it appropriate for the hardware, and it also removed the new side story that was introduced in FES, but it also made a lot of good improvements to the combat, like being able to control all your party members. It added skill cards, it rebalanced the combat, and best of all, it introduced the female protagonist, which it adds new music, new social links, and it's overall just a new experience, and I definitely think Portable is the best way to play this game.
Alright, and now we're at Shin Megami Tensei Persona 4. Fun fact, this is the last game to use the Shin Megami Tensei title that's not actually Shin Megami Tensei. The major theme behind this game is the truth, and what that means is the truth behind people. So regarding the acknowledging that you're both good and bad as a person, no one is truly just a good person. There's always some bad, and we have to recognize that and consolidate that and constantly work on that, as well as the truth of the game, which is a literal mystery game. So there's that. I wanted to make a note of this game's sales because, well, I haven't updated it to reflect the confirmed 500K, but this game was the next biggest Persona to be a hit. All the games were pretty successful, but Persona 1 and Persona 4 were the biggest selling games, with Persona 4 hitting 520,000 for its just original release. Golden selling 700,000, being a Vita-only console or game, and then the port of Golden for Steam. Here's another chart that kind of shows it. It's a little inaccurate because Persona 1 actually sold 500,000 copies.
It is the worst chart I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, but just imagine this is a little higher, and then these are just kind of a little higher. But it's I just wanted you to kind of see that this boost in sales for Persona led to what people would then dub the milking. Some people kind of think that Persona 5 is the first one to do it, but no. So here's a timeline of releases, not all of them, but just wanted you to get a good understanding of this. So after the 2008 release of Persona 4, we got an anime, we got the remaster, we got a fighting game, we got a dancing game, we also got a Etrian-based dungeon game. this one is special because it has two anime actually. It has Persona 4 and the animation, and Persona 4 Golden. Both are made by A1, a studio acclaimed for their high quality work, known as one of the best in the industry, hence A1. Things to note about the development: Persona 4 began its development right after the release of Persona 3, and this is the game where they actually hired more staff to make a higher quality production, and most of the new hires were huge fans of Persona 3. They focused on what they could change from Persona 3 to make Persona 4 better. Another kind of weird thing is that in the game, there's a couple of characters that are villainous. They changed who that was mid-game, and that kind of changed the story a bit, but also his design wasn't changed, so it kind of makes what happens a bit of a surprise. This is something that Alice also does with most games, but in here it was the most prevalent. They do internal discussions about how to fix games, so anybody who works at Atlas, whether you're a director or a janitor, you can input your opinion on how to make a game better. And for Persona 4, they received 2,000 comments, whether it was personal preference or problems that people perceived in the game, and they addressed at least 1,500 of those concerns. And unlike previous titles, Persona 4 has the whole in-game weather thing. They did that to create a sense of urgency, and I think it kind of works. Yes. And here's some trivia. So the name Inaba, it's a reference to the hair of Inaba. It's a famous mythological creature in Japan. But it's also the surname of today's birthday boy, Masao Inaba. The name Jeunesse comes from the French word jeunesse, which means young, or youth. This is why the Japanese motto is everyday young life, jeunesse. You know, as opposed to whatever the American one is. So, and then
I'm sorry. I just had to laugh at you for a second. I had to mute my mic to laugh. Okay, go.
So in Persona 3, they shoot themselves as symbolism for their the overarching meaning of the game. In this one, they crush the cards to summon the persona, and that's supposed to symbolize basically taking hold and destroying or controlling the dark parts of yourself. That's what the crushing is supposed to be. In the spin-off novel / manga Detective Naoto helps Kanji launch a line of plushies that are then sold at Junes. Thought that was kind of interesting. There's also a prequel novel called The Magician, which follows Yosuke as he moves into Inaba. So if you want to see the worst character do stuff, then read that if you can read Japanese. Risei's idol name in Japanese is Risechi. It was changed partially because they were afraid that her name sounds too much like Risei cheese, so they changed it to Rosette to sound more like reset. Chie references Raido Kuzuno in the English version, but in the Japanese version, it's actually Kindaichi, a famous detective in Japan. Fictional detective. And there's also unused dialogue where Yosuke actually confesses his love to you. Not like bro love, but like romantic love. All right. Persona 5. So Persona 5 was famously delayed. We got this slide here that literally lies to us saying it's going to be released in 2014. But there's a reason for that. So some things to note about the development is that they wanted to surprise fans with handcrafted dungeons as opposed to random dungeons, which we did get in Mementos. Not Mementos, sorry. But we get that in Mementos, but they wanted to basically do handcrafted dungeons for the main story because that would then look higher quality and feel higher quality and feel like a more true tailored experience. Persona 5 was envisioned originally as a backpacking travel story, so they were going to go around the world, not unlike SMT1 was going to go around the world and end in, I forgot. Israel. But the 2011 earthquake, it like changed the way Hoshino was thinking about the story, and he instead decided to make it a Japan-centric game, and that's why it takes place in Tokyo. And
I think SMT1 was supposed to end in Jerusalem. I don't know.
Stop interrupting me.
Don't call me on that.
So Persona 5's core theme. So this is something you're gonna see a lot is Hoshino says a lot of different things are the core theme, but one of the main core themes is the idea that when you can gather a bunch of people who have the same feeling or they can overcome hardships together because of that unity. And the 2014 delay was actually caused because the PlayStation 4 was announced, and they had to redraw all the 2D elements just so it could look and work properly in the PlayStation 4. And famously, Hoshino said that the gender option wasn't done in Persona 5 just because it would make the game's development too long, which, safe to say, it was a pretty long development cycle. So there's a lot of literary inspirations to Persona 5. Persona 5 is a episodic story because it follows the picaresque story type, and that's just a story type that's episodic, and basically you're following a morally gray hero. Usually they're a thief or, you know, some other kind of criminal that has a lot of endearing elements to them. Usually they're just very likable. So think Lupin or anyone else. And Hoshino says about this that if there's one thing that lies at the center of our themes in this game, it's the notion that people have that there can be things that with their lives, or whatever. I messed up that quote reading. Just read the quote. And all of these literary inspirations that I listed are somewhat picaresque. The story of Ishikawa Goemon, he's that rebel guy who was boiled alive. Lupin, who has that long-running, had that short story series. And The Fiend of 20 Faces, that's probably one of the most significant inspirations. All right, so some things that they did with Persona 5 is they actually brought back Sai and Frey, the nuclear element and Psi elements. Those were introduced in Persona 1. They also brought back guns. Persona 5 reintroduced demon negotiation, which was absent in 3 and 4, and new mechanics, such as being all stealth, not unlike Sly Cooper. Here's some trivia that I pulled up for Persona 5. Alice said that they believe that Yusuke would be very interested in cross-dressing just because he aspires to find the essence of true beauty, and cross-dressing might help him realize that. And they also said that throughout the beginning of Persona 5, Makoto is like watching the Phantom Thieves, and apparently she's aware that she sucks at hiding, but she just doesn't know how else to react to that situation. They also say that Goro is very popular at his school, with all the teachers and students respecting him, especially the male students in particular. And then I tried to figure out what Becky meant for Atlas, but apparently Becky was just, there's no real meaning behind it. They just chose that because they wanted it to be different from Kawakami. Another thing is Joker's original persona was going to be Mephisto. He's that guy that whole thing about sleepy. And you should definitely look him up. I believe he appears in Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse. So that was going to be the original persona, but then they ended up going with Arsène because it fits the themes better. And then Cendrillon, she's the French way of pronouncing Cinderella. That persona is based heavily on the version of Cinderella as told by Charles Perrault, which is the version that Disney took its inspiration from. And Kasumi is based on 70s to 80s manga heroines, hence the ponytail, hence the gymnastics. And lastly, a lot of the Persona 5 royal art was done by just Hanako Aribe, Akane Kabayashi, and Asuza Shimada, not Soejima. Famously, the Persona 5 art book actually has the cover art is actually done by Hanako Aribe and Asuza Shimada. So if you like that art book's cover a lot, that's them, not Soejima. You should read his art book. They get interviews in that. All right, and that's the end of the presentation portion. If you guys have any questions for us, we'll answer a few for the next 30 minutes.
Holy shit.
Pretty early.
Yeah. It's whatever. I'm sure people got questions. Okie dokie. Ask questions.
Q&A time.
Somebody asked where could we rewatch this? It's probably on your channel, wasn't it, Larrue?
I'm gonna upload it on my channel unless for whatever reason it's not good looking, which would just mean that I messed up recording, which I did last night where I tested it and I didn't even record. Okay, why are you all so handsome?
Shut up. Anyways, Nyarly, can you explain why they shoot themselves in Persona 3?
I think that was Okay, well, I read about this. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's because, like, they wanted to make, like, a way to evoke their personas. That they wanted to make it in a way that would stand out, basically.
Yeah.
And I think it's explained in the movies that you shoot yourself in the head to, like, represent your acceptance of, like, or not fear of death or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's something like that.
Yeah. Let's see. Filthy asks, what did Soejima actually draw in Persona 5? So in the original Persona 5, not Royal, he did the character portraits for the Phantom Thieves. Don't remember what else. I know he designed the character portraits and he had to get approval for, or he approved the art that they used in the game. So like the I forgot what it's called. The Showtimes? Is it called Showtime? What's it called? The thing where they that's something that the other artists
things,
yeah, the all out attacks. That thing, he had to approve the art. I believe that was done by Oribe. Let's see. What's another question we got? Why does Larrue use...
Has Atlas ever responded to the people saying they milked the series? Have they? I don't think
I've read pretty much every interview.
It's fucking stupid.
Yeah, I don't think that they've ever announced or like discussed that at all. They've only kind of seen it in terms of these things are successful. So they typically, when they do respond to fan sentiment, it's usually this thing was a success, and then they just bounce off of that. I don't think that they've ever mentioned, milking.
I think it's real important to mention, though, because I fucking hate it when people say that Atlas milks their games, starting with Persona 4. They've been doing this since Shin Megami Tensei 1. There's like 50 re-releases, 50 billion novels and spin-offs and products and things, all based off of SMT1, based off of Persona 1, SMT2, SMT-IF, Nocturne. Oh my god. There's so much shit based off of Nocturne. It's crazy.
Yeah,
the idea that they consistently milk Persona 4 and 5 and that's it is just really untrue and just kind of made in bad faith to shame Atlas for giving their games attention when the games that came out, SMT Nocturne wasn't even that popular. It was considered a failure when it came out in Japan, the original version, and it still got milked to death. It still got all those things. So I think it's important to know that.
I'm going to answer this question. Why does Larrue use the sound test in every video? Because, one, it doesn't get copyright claimed, because originally I used the Daedalus song from, I think it's from Megami Tensei 2, and that got copyright claimed, and it was really annoying because I really like that song. So I thought to myself,
Tsukasa Mitsuko.
Yeah, Tsukasa Mitsuko, you're a good composer, but you're malicious. Like, come on. Anyway, so I use sound test because not only do I like that song, it's one of my favorite Meguro tracks, but also, it's easy to kind of extend. So that's why.
Somebody asked, do you agree with the re-released enhanced ports like Fez, Golden, and Royal in an age where DLC is becoming more common to add more story content, or do you not mind it?
I don't mind it until they start doing DLC. So my personal take is that these re-releases can be really good. Like, a good example of that is Devil Survivor Overclocked is the definitive Devil Survivor experience. It's very, very good. Then you have Strange Journey Redux, which is, in my opinion, one of the worst examples of a remake, because it fundamentally changes the game and it just, like, it stirs this, it creates this ugly new narrative that is not the original experience. It's not an addition to it. It's an augmentation. Persona 5 Royal is kind of a mixture between the two in that it changes, but it also enhances. So I don't mind it as long as it's better. I don't really like Golden compared to the original 4, but I do like Fest and P3P a lot better than the original Persona 3.
It's only an issue for me when I feel like their justification for re-releasing the same game is we added a new character and it affects the way the story is paced. I don't like Marie in Golden for that specific reason, because she's forced in there, you have to interact with her, and the plot revolves around her, which is obnoxious as hell, and I don't think it's good. And especially in Strange Journey Redux, the new content in that game, it feels out of place and forced, and it just doesn't fit with the theme of the original game. So it feels like it's stopping the pacing of a game like Strange Journey, which already has pretty terrible pacing, to introduce some new shit that you're probably not interested in. It's just really bad. I don't know what Nyarly feels about it, but...
Redux?
Just remakes in general, like the remakes, like Golden Fez.
I mean, it kind of depends. Like, I mean, Royal I thought was pretty good, but I didn't think it was worth $60. Then Golden I also thought was pretty good. It's definitely worth $20 on Steam.
Yeah.
Like, it really just depends on the remake.
So,
I think
yeah.
I think the best Megaton remake is Persona 3 Portable.
Yeah.
Because that just adds so much new content into the game and it rebalances the combat.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's overclocked, but I can see that too. Another question we got was... So then Kiwi asked, how do we get a hold of the Megaton manga? Unfortunately, unless you import from Japan, you're typically going to have to rely on eBay. eBay is like the worst place to buy Megaton things because it's always jacked up to a ridiculous degree. Highly recommend importing. I have a guide to importing on my YouTube channel. You can watch that if you'd like. I have a promo code too, so. But
somebody asked, where does the Persona story we have today start? What's the first canon one? Well, the Persona canon is weird because of the plot in Persona 2 kind of fucks with it a little bit. But it's safe to say that the original one is SMT if, which is already fucked since it's a what if situation of the mainline SMT thing. I think it's kind of important. I don't think it's important to fucking pay attention to the canon, but SMT if is where the story starts. And then somewhere in that timeline, Devil Summoner 1 on the Sega Saturn happens. And then Soul Hackers happens, and then they converge in Persona 1 and 2.
And I disagree with that because I think that what happens is in most of the games for the series, or the franchise really, they're not actually in a timeline order. It's more like what would happen if after this, and it doesn't actually connect to it. That's why a lot of the references to Persona 1 and 2, for instance, in the later games, they're why even if that's true, it wouldn't make sense because Makagicho is also based off Tokyo, a small part of Tokyo. But we have literal Tokyo in Persona 5. I think I talked about this before we started recording. And it doesn't make sense. It would not function right. And the rules of Persona change game to game, but also substantially between Persona 1 and Persona 5. To the point where if you tried to connect them on a linear line, it doesn't add up. And then you have all these alternative medias, the novels. You have Trinity Soul, which is like a spin-off of Persona 3. And that version of Persona is completely different from everything else.
It's not canon anymore.
My opinion is I don't believe in a canon. I've literally never saw Atlas refer to a canon of games. And I've read most Atlas interviews that are available. I've never seen them mention a canon or a timeline besides the Nocturne documentary, which has an official canon or timeline, but it doesn't make sense even in the official sense. It doesn't make sense. So I don't think it's worth the effort of trying to force them to all match up. Is there a translation of the Devil Summoner? Devil Summoner 1? There's an unofficial one, but I don't know if they there's no like hacked version. You just have to like look at the script and play. Let's see why did Tadashi Satomi leave? He didn't give any official statement. He left. He's worked on other projects since then. His last major one was Caligula, which may be getting a sequel or manga or anime adaptation. I forget which of the two it's getting, but it's not very good. You should try it anyway. What are my thoughts? What are your guys' thoughts on Q and Q2?
Bad games.
I don't
really like them at all.
Q1 is kind of meh. Q2 is decent.
I like Q1's characters better. Like in terms of the new characters they introduced, Zen and Rei are two of my favorite like non-mainline Persona characters because they're just cool and interesting. The gameplay is good, but I don't like fan service in general. And since those two games function as fan service, I did not like the story or the characterization because they reduce everybody down to the tropes that they make, and I didn't really care for it. Persona Q2 has significantly better gameplay though.
Yeah, when I play games like Persona, I really focus more on the characterization, and it's already a big issue in the Hashino Persona games that if you're not completing the social link, then they're just one-note generic anime tropes, and they do absolutely nothing with that character outside of their individual arc. And then games like Persona Q1, and I haven't finished Q2 yet, I started it and then I just dropped it. They have that same issue where except in those games, they just don't get an arc. They don't do a good job of explaining who the character is outside of their, like caricature, and that's it. That's their entire character for the entire game. So they
You
can't
just
develop
you just described
at
fan
all.
service. That's what.
I mean, yeah, it's literally like a filler fan service episode of like a TV show or an anime. They can't develop, they can't learn new things, they can't grow as people, they can't progress anymore, and it just don't make no sense. Why the fuck would you play a game like that unless you were just not interested in characters at all?
I think it's good. I mean, it's literally fan service. You just kind of said that a bunch in a long way.
Shut up.
They ask what our favorite Persona games are. My personal one is Persona 1, but for me it's like Persona 1, Eternal Punishment. Those are like they're the highest, my favorite, because I like Dad was saying just not too long ago. I really prefer like deep characterization, and Eternal Punishment, Persona 2 and Eternal Punishment has to me the best overall character writing in all of the games, and I really like them. And I think it's because I'm older too, so I kind of gravitate towards that. In terms of like other things, Persona 4 Dancing is one of my favorites in terms of gameplay because I love rhythm games, and it's the best rhythm game that of the Persona Dancing rhythm games. And Arena Ultimax is another one that I really like a lot. What about you guys? Favorite Personas?
Nyarly.
Persona 3 Portable.
Why do you like Persona 3 Portable so much, Nyarly?
Because I like I like the characters and the story of Persona 3. Like, I don't think the cast of Persona 3 is as good as Persona 2, but I think out of the modern Persona games, it's the best cast. I think the story's interesting, and like Persona 3, like on PS2, like admittedly the combat was kind of janky, like it was poorly balanced, and you couldn't control your party members. But Portable fixes all that, and then it also adds the female protagonist. Like that game just has so much content.
Yeah, my favorite Persona game is Eternal Punishment because I like the fact that it has an adult cast, because unlike stupid teenagers, adults actually have a lot of, very complex real world issues that a lot of people can eventually grow to relate to, unfortunately. I think the writing is really good, and I think having that different perspective of teenagers in innocent sin having issues growing into adults, and having Eternal Punishment's cast being adults who also have their own issues is just really well written. But Persona 1's pretty up there, and I think after that is like 4, and then 5, and then 3's the worst.
Another good question we got is what's your favorite social link / confidant? Confidant for me easily is Torinosuke Yoshida. Such a good written character. He's not only is he likable, but he actually runs counter to the Persona 5's like general premise of adults generally being bad, because he has his story is a redemption story arc. Owai is the same way, and so is Tei. And I think that those three basically embody really good story writing, and they're my favorites like characters in Persona 5. For playables, Ryuji is my favorite confidant because I think that his story is great. It just sucks that he becomes, after the first dungeon, he's just comedy relief. They just keep using him as a punching bag, and I don't like that personally. For other games, Yukari was my favorite social link in Persona 3. And for Persona 4, it was Kanji. Just because I have always related to Kanji, the idea of liking things that are typically considered feminine, and being insulted for that. Like, it's always been something that like I've dealt with, because I've always liked sewing, drawing, stuff like that. So I can relate to that. What about you guys? Your favorite social link / confidant?
Are we talking about? Okay. I'm gonna say the tower social link from Persona 3, who is Mutatsu. Like, wow. He's the drunken mug. I mean, he's like he kind of like gives the player advice, like life advice, and like I feel like a lot of the advice he gives I can actually I've actually applied it like to my own personal life, and yeah, that's the main reason I like it. And he's also just a very well written character. Like, I mean, kind of like Yoshida, it's also kind of a redemption arc, because like, he has family issues, so he just goes to the nightclub, he gets drunk every night. But no, I'm not gonna spoil it.
Yeah, I know it's hard to talk about it without spoiling it, but yeah.
You like any from 4 or 5?
I mean, honestly, I can't really think of any memorable social links from Persona 4, but Okay. For Persona 5, definitely EY, definitely Yoshida. Who else? There's a catchy social link from Persona 5 Royal.
Bruh.
And Dr. Maruki's.
I haven't played Persona 5 Royal past the first dungeon, so I don't know.
Actually, I take it back. My second favorite in the series is probably Maruki's social link from Royal.
Is it because you look like Maruki?
Yeah.
He is Maruki. But my favorite personally is Ayabihara from Persona 4. Basically because it's just a real world issue that people go through. There's a lot of superficial people that you know hide behind their looks to like make the bad parts of them less bad in their eyes. Like, oh, it's okay because I'm pretty. I know that because I do that all the time. There's no bad aspect of me though. I'm just really pretty. I wanted to point that out. But Hisano, the death social link from Persona 4 is probably
Oh, that's a good one, yeah.
infinitely better written, and it's an issue that I feel like a lot of people could go through, whether you're young or old, just like coping with death. Like low-key, just my personal opinion, I kind of think that Persona 4 like deals with the concept of death a lot better than Persona 3 does. But you know, social links like Nanako, Dojima, Hisano, things like that, and even Yosuke's, and he's probably the best party member in that game. Because they just deal with that concept in such different ways. It's so gripping, you know? Everyone has to deal with that, and the way they go about doing that is great. Persona 5 is probably Yoshida for the same reasons that Larrue listed, and then 3, no comment.
Let's see. Least favorite gameplay-wise Megaten game. If ranks really low for me, I would say that if the problem I have with If is that I read the manga and I read Con, and those are infinitely better than the actual game, and I think that's kind of weird to say you should read the manga because it's better than the game, because the game doesn't give you story. The gameplay itself is confusing to me, anyways. Maybe my brain is just really small. And then also Sloth Dungeon, which, you know, it's a meme that it's bad, but it's actually horrible, and they don't even fix it. The fact that Atlas themselves recognize that Sloth is bad and it used to be worse, and they actually reduced it a little bit, and like that just kind of speaks to how bad that is. And it was only made in like 6 months.
It's only reduced in the easy mode of the PS1 version.
Like, that's my worst. I generally like every other Megaten game, like gameplay wise.
Literally, Larrue and Spider told me to avoid playing that game. I was like, oh, should I play it? They're like, no. At the same time, they were just like, no. So thankfully, I haven't played a game as bad as SNTF. From what what I've heard and what I've seen from my friend Filthy streaming the game, it's probably one of the worst games I've ever seen in my entire life. Not just RPGs, just in general. But because I haven't played that game, the worst for me is Persona 3. I hate that game so much.
And for the record, this is not me saying you should never play If you're interested, you should try it. I think everyone should try every Megaten just to see if they like it, because my opinions are based on my life experience, and obviously that does not mean that what I'm saying is the truth. It's just my opinion. I don't like If, but I've seen a lot of people that apparently love If. Nyarly, your favorite? Are you your least favorite Megaten game play?
In terms of gameplay?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I haven't played that much of SMTF, so, honestly, I know I'm gonna get crucified for saying this, it's probably SMT1.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say Strange Journey. I was getting ready to, like, punch you.
Why did I say Strange Journey?
Because it's just like 1, but better. Okay, I mean, I get it, though. I can see why you wouldn't like 1.
It's a lot better.
I mean, SMT1 low-key does have a lot of issues, and if you're not working the game, you're not going to have fun with it.
It's pretty much, I mean, if you're not using a guide, you're going to get lost. I mean, the main reason I say this is because of the navigation. It's horrible. It's just the UI is confusing.
And the fact that they have dark zones in that game is even worse. Like, you straight up have to draw your own map, which I think is just like a thing of the times. They kind of expected you to use a guide or draw out your own map, which is cool, but playing it in 2020 is just not something that you probably want to have fun. See where you're coming from. They'll be so mad.
Yeah, you got a lot of people mad with that. That's funny. Someone asked, Kiwi asked, did anyone play Jack Bros? I've beaten Jack Bros more than 100 times. Easily my most played Megaten game.
I I take that back. It's not SMT1. It's
Jack Bros.
Revelations of Demon Slayer.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
bad version of
definitely.
Last Bible, but Last Bible itself is not that great. The other Last Bible games are way better.
Yeah, what makes SMT stand out is like the unique gameplay on top of the weird demons and the plot and things like that. It's basically like a diet SMT game if it had generic Dragon Quest Final Fantasy battle systems.
Yeah, and like with SMT1, it's like, you know, the combat is good, the story is good, the characters are good. It's just, I mean, it's navigation is just kind of it kind of makes or breaks games for me.
Yeah.
And then going back to Last Bible, like, it's also really easy to wander into a high level area.
Yeah, but I love that. That's like old Dragon Quest. I love that, like, we can just go random and grind. But I love grinding, so
Like the little island in Final Fantasy 1 that has like the level 90 monsters.
yep. Oh, beautiful. I love that. That's so perfect.
Before you move on, B also says SMT1 does need a remake, though, or at least a fan translation. The GBA or PS1 versions. There actually was a translation of the GBA version released for iOS, but then when iOS 11 came out, Atlas didn't update it, so it's basically it's basically abandonware.
Yeah. Some guy asks, what do you guys think of Digital Devil Story, the first game in the franchise?
Megami Tensei Digital Devil Story. Filthy likes that game a lot. He's the I'm gonna just say, go ahead and follow Filthy if you like watching people play Megaten games. He plays them all. He's the fourth fastest SMT1 player. He's in the chat right now. But I personally didn't really like it that much. It takes place after the first two books, so in the first book, you already know that Loki's the bad guy. The second book, I believe it's Osei. The next part is Lucifer revives Osei and Loki. I think that's what happens. I don't remember. Didn't really like it that much. Compared to the second one, which is the one that starts the SMT formula. And that's why I like it. Plus the main character Hidito from Megami Tensei 2 is like probably my second favorite protagonist. He loses his hand. Do you know how sucky it is to have one hand?
He don't lose his hand. He loses his whole ass arm.
Well,
don't underplay it.
He loses a big part of who he is. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I played Kyoku Megami Tensei, which is the SNES remakes of those games, and I kind of dropped one after like 30 minutes, so that's how much I care about that game.
Another person asked us what our favorite Megaten soundtrack was and our favorite song.
Nyarly, that's you, baby. Oh, he's thinking. He's thinking about it.
No, his dog is attacking him. My favorite SMT soundtrack is probably Strange Journeys. Scepter of Justice is by far my favorite Megaten song of all time. I want it to be played at my funeral. Like, I love it that much.
Good, because you're gonna die today.
My favorite Megaten soundtrack is probably Knights of the Holy Lance from Persona 2.
Ooh,
nice. My top three, because I can't decide, is Persona or SMT4 is number one, and then for the coveted silver medal is probably Soul Hackers or Persona 1, and then I think after that is Majin Tensei 2 and Persona 2, right next to each other. I think my favorite song from Persona specifically is The Round Sun or Nichimaru, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
It's called. Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, really the best fucking song ever made.
So I guess my favorite Persona song is probably the GNS theme song. I actually do like that. Well, no, that's not my favorite, but
you were singing it all day today before you even fucking got here. Just singing it.
Cause Everyday Young Life. But my other favorites are Catherine, and I like the two songs we got for RE Project Fantasy. I can already tell it's gonna be my favorite Meguro OST.
Yeah, Shoji Meguro peaked with Soul Hackers, and you can't convince me otherwise. Everything after 1997 is all downhill.
Okay, we got another question. Is there a way to play P2 Eternal Punishment on an emulator?
Yes.
Yes,
PS1
but only
emulator,
PS1.
not
Yeah.
PSP version. I mean, there's a translation. There's like a fan translation for the PSP version, but it's been in translation hell for what, like 6 years.
I believe the problem is hacking. Same thing with Devil Summoner. Is the hacking part is difficult.
Like they got the translation part done. It's just their hacker is like he's it's difficult and he's on hiatus.
Mm-hmm.
Is Catherine SMT? No.
I think what makes it SMT is the thematics. Generally, if you look at the elements behind Catherine, a lot of the things that Catherine does is similar to what Megaten generally does, which, like Persona, it asks very introspective questions, which is the underlying thing for Catherine. Like SMT, it offers multiple endings, and I think that's enough to kind of justify it being Megaten. Atlas doesn't call it Megaten, but I do, and I am Atlas, so Atlas does call it Megaten.
Well, it's You guys want to keep doing questions because
it's 10. Yeah. Oh, sorry. You guys are on other time.
I mean, you guys can keep doing them if you want. I actually gotta go pick up my brother.
All right.
Hey, tell him I said hi.
Okay, I will.
I love you.
Okay, bye. I think we'll answer one more question and then we'll go.
Give me a kiss before you leave. What the fuck was that? That was so weak.
You want me to? There, was that better?
Yeah, that was so much better. Thank you, bro.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, bye, Nyarly. One more question and then we'll end the panel.
Let's tighten it up. Give us the best question you could possibly imagine, and if it's stupid, I'm just gonna ignore you for the rest of the convention.
Thought-provoking question.
Thought-provoking question.
A real noodle scratcher.
Don't talk about using your noodle like that, bro. What do I want?
I mean that's the relevant one because we're talking about Persona. Persona 6 because it's directed by what's his name? Kazuhisa Wada?
I don't know.
I believe he directed the Persona 4 Dancing, which is literally the best spin-off in my opinion. You not only
get a terrible fucking plot though, so that's not really a sign of good things.
It's got the best gameplay. That rhythm game is a solid rhythm game. Anyway, I would just like for them to do kind of like what they did with Persona 3, where they somewhat reinvent the wheel. They just kind of look at how to make Persona appeal to that same core demographic, the 17 to 20, I think it's 17 to 21 or whatever is their target audience. Make it appeal to that demographic, but like of now, so the people who are entering 2021 and they're like 17. And so they have to just really look at what that means for a Japanese audience, but also if they look globally this time, because now they understand that the Western fans are quite large and fervent and ravenous and toxic. So I think that if they really look at that, I don't really care about the gameplay as long as the story and characters are really well written. Haven't really seen that from Wada.
That Daiki Ito, the director, the guy who worked on Golden and Royal, is going to be that. So hopefully it's a little more royal and less golden.
Yeah,
that's all. Yeah, because like I don't know. The only thing that I care about is that the plot is good, and hopefully they decide to not go further deeper into the fucking weird anime fan service dating little girls type shit. And if they do add a female protagonist, don't let this one date the 10-year-old, please. I fucking beg you.
Yeah, actually, that is something that, in my opinion, should be required based on the day and age to show the modernity of the franchise. Is there should be like there should be more than just there should be more than just the typical thing. What is it? Not what's the opposite of homo? Jeez, I forgot that word.
Hetero?
Yeah, there shouldn't just be hetero dating options, in my opinion, because if you're gonna appeal to like everyone, then I think that it would behooves to you to actually have like trans representation that's not a punchline, and homosexual representation that's also not a punchline, and have them like it doesn't have to be the core of their character, but they can be trans and a good character instead of trans and it's funny, So let's do that. All right. Thanks for coming to the convention. Enjoy the rest of the convention. Thanks for coming to the panel. Convention's still going. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye, fellow Megatenists.